However, only Korean viewers will have understood the true double meaning of this episode's title right away. Hello friends and welcome to another episode of Do You Want to Play Game With Me? As you can probably already tell, today we will talk about Squid Game, the latest Korean hit on Netflix. This Battle Royale type series is not only thrilling and addictive to watch, it also features a lot of Korean culture. There's actually a huge spoiler in one of the episode's titles that only Korean people will be able to understand right away. That's why I will explain the background of the Korean games and culture so that you can have an even more meaningful viewing experience. But beware, there will be spoilers for some major plot points, so if you're not ready for that, go watch the show and then come back and watch this video. Let's get started with episode 1. The show opens with the Squid Game. This is an old Korean children's game where two teams play on a playing field that is somewhat shaped like a squid. You know, with squids having kind of a triangular head shape? One attacking team is trying to get to a specific spot on the playing field, while the defending team has to stop them. And although the Squid Game is having a big revival now through the show, it is actually not a game that has been played in recent times in Korea. So even Koreans who were children 20 or 30 years ago might already not know of this game. Next, we meet several people who are in huge debt or need a lot of money for a specific reason. And you might be wondering to yourself, in a developed country like South Korea, are there really that many people in debt? But the reality might actually be bleaker than the show. For example, as of March of this year, Koreans in their 20s and 30s have accumulated a combined debt of $396 billion. That is twice the net worth of the richest person on this planet. Huh? And the overall household debt of this country exceeds $1.5 trillion. So finding people desperate enough to join the games might actually be easier than you think. The game that is played with down-on-their-luck people before they are recruited into the games is called dakjichigi. Dakjichigi is a traditional South Korean game in which folded paper tiles, the dakji, are thrown on top of each other to try to turn them over. It is a children's game aimed to improve motor skills and social skills and definitely not made for gambling. Different from the Squid Game, dakjichigi is still very widely known and played by many children, although nowadays, rather than the paper tiles, they use plastic chips of Pokemon or other characters to play this game. Anyway, with the second game introduced, we can clearly see a pattern. All the games and mini-games in this show are children's games or activities typically done by children, but now they have been corrupted into something much more sinister. One of our players, Sang-woo, the business investor and my personal enemy number 1, you know what you did, is introduced as a success story mainly because he went to a prestigious university. In the photo in his mother's store, we can clearly see that he went to Seoul National University, which is ranked as the #1 university in this country. It is pretty much guaranteed that you will have a successful life if you get into this university, though we saw how that worked out. Still, getting into a Sky University, meaning Seoul National University, Korea University, and Yonsei University, is still seen as a huge accomplishment here in Korea. Oh? How did my master degree diploma from Korea University get here, one of the Sky Universities? Oh, that is so weird. And lastly, for this episode, we come to the titular red light, green light, or 무궁화 꽃이 피었습니다 in Korean, which means the hibiscus flower has bloomed. Hibiscus is the national flower of Korea, so you can see it in various state emblems of the government. For example, in this letter I got from the Blue House when I went to visit the First Lady. 짜잔! See, here's the signature of the First Lady and the President. Here's the First Lady, and here am I. If this is not a flex, I don't know what is. And you can also see the hibiscus flower on this presidential watch. Moving on to episode 2. In this episode, we can see a lot of social commentary. For example, that the Korean police is seen as kind of weak and unreliable, or that even if you have a serious illness, you might not be able to get treatment if you don't have insurance. And although those are topics I could dedicate whole videos to on their own, today I will just briefly touch on them to let you know that they're not just dramatic exaggerations, but represent actual issues here. We also see some honorary mentions of Korean culture, like the convenience store where you can buy cigarettes, various foods and drinks, phone chargers, and pretty much everything else that you might imagine. We also see the most popular alcoholic drink of Korea, soju, paired with a snack of uncooked ramen noodles. Next, we see a go시원, which is a type of room that is often rented by university students or other people without a lot of money. go시wons are typically tiny, and the cheapest ones really only fit a bed, a desk, and don't even have a window. I also spent a couple of months in a go시won in Korea, although mine was pretty nice. I even had my own little bathroom booth, a refrigerator, and a washing machine, so it was pretty okay to stay at. Still, the go시won in the show not only accurately depicts a low-budget go시won, but also tells us that the frontman who won the Squid Games in 2015 did not use his money to buy himself a beautiful home, but only stays in this rundown go시won. The second half of this episode must be my favorite part of the show, artistically speaking, because while our main characters are introduced, we also see some of their deaths foreshadowed. And those who won't die don't have such a foreshadowing scene. Starting with everyone's favorite character, Abdul Ali. I even dedicated my costume to him. It is never explicitly stated in the show that he is an illegal immigrant, although there are some hints that make it seem likely. The Korean government does not really disclose information relevant to this, but it is estimated that around 300,000 illegal immigrants live in Korea. Many of those people try to make money here to send back home to their families in their home countries. The main problem that such workers face is that they are easily exploited by their employer. Since they are here without a visa or not with a visa for working, they cannot report the employer to the police, even if he doesn't pay them, like in Ali's case, or even abuse or sexually harass them. So cases like we see in the show, where the workers are not paid for several months, are actually shockingly common. And the workers don't have a choice but to wait it out and hope things get better, or risk deportation. And in terms of foreshadowing, here we see Ali being scammed and taken advantage of by a slimy Korean man, and later on he dies because he's being scammed and taken advantage of by another slimy Korean man. He deserved better. Next, we have Sebyok, a defector from North Korea. Mini history lesson here. After the Korean War, Korea was divided into North Korea and South Korea and has been this way ever since. While South Korea has become the modernized and globalized nation we all know, North Korea is still a totalitarian dictatorship where survival isn't easy. That is why every year hundreds and even thousands of people try to flee the country while risking their lives. Since it is impossible to enter South Korea directly from the north, they first have to flee to China or another bordering country, from which they might have to relocate several times more before they can finally enter South Korea. This process can take years, always has the danger of being found out and sent back to North Korea, and cost a huge amount of money. This is because the defectors need the help of brokers and smugglers to get them out of the north and organize fake identification documents so they can actually go through other countries. We learn that Sebyok succeeded in fleeing with her brother, but she still wants to get her mother out of the north. And her attempt to do so has already failed once, which leaves her strapped for money. Although there are several programs here in South Korea that try to help North Korean refugees and support them financially, this support is fairly limited. Plus, the Korean government cannot officially help somebody get their family out of North Korea, because this could be seen as meddling in the affairs of another nation and could provoke conflict. And nobody wants to risk that. Also, we see Sebyok's death foreshadowed as she threatens to slit somebody's throat, which is how she will die later on in the show. Next, our Seoul University golden boy, Sang-woo, is trying to commit suicide in a bathtub by burning Yeontan. Yontan is a coal briquette used for cooking in Korea, but it has also often been used for suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning. Guns are not available to the public in South Korea, so gas poisoning is one of the most painless ways to end your life here. And of course, this is another hint at how he will actually end his life in a later episode. Suicide is another big problem in Korea, as the nation has the highest suicide rate among OECD countries, and suicide has been the leading cause of death for young people since 2007. Since insecurities about the future and financial problems are main reasons for suicide here, it makes sense that Sang-woo considered this option for himself. And last but not least, we have Doksu, a member of organized crime, or in Korean, a gangpae. Although South Korea is a relatively safe country overall, we still have all the crimes that other countries do too. Organized crime here is often linked to assault, extortion, illegal gambling, and loan sharking, with a little bit of sex trafficking sprinkled in too. Korean gangsters also have ties internationally, so working together with a Philippine crime syndicate like we could see in the show is definitely possible. Also, Doksu represents the fourth foreshadowed death, as we see him fall from a bridge, and that is also how he will die later on. Before we go on though, it is getting super hot in this jacket, so let me take it off, and while I do so, you can leave a like if you enjoyed the video so far. I'm wearing black. I'm the frontman now. It all matches. I was the frontman all along. Okay, so with me exposed as the frontman, let's head into episode 3, an episode that is all about Korean food. First up is an old-fashioned Korean lunchbox. This kind of lunchbox was eaten by school children back in our parents' generation, but you can still find it in various restaurants today. The lunchbox can be eaten neatly one by one, like we see in the show, or you can just shake it real hard and then eat it like that, which is kind of fun and also super delicious. And of course, we have the world-famous dalgona or dalgona 볶기. You might wonder how Sang-woo was able to guess that this would be the next game so easily. But he knew that melted sugar would be involved, and dalgona 볶기 is just such a popular game among children in Korea. So for a Korean, this would actually be a pretty simple guess, which makes me even more furious that this rat did not share that information with his team. Anyway, dalgona gained worldwide popularity in 2020 when dalgona coffee became a trend. And now that trend is continuing with the original dalgona candy. This candy is made just from melted sugar and baking soda and is also called honeycomb candy in English. However, the original name dalgona comes from a Korean expression dalgona, which means something like, oh, it's sweet. The game dalgona 볶기 is offered by street vendors here, with 볶기 literally meaning to pick out or select. So dalgona 볶기 describes the game where you pick out a shape out of the dalgona without breaking it. If you succeed in doing so, you usually get one more dalgona for free, so you want to pick the simplest shapes if you want to succeed. There wasn't really anything I thought needed further explanation in the episodes 4 and 5, so let's skip right to episode 6. Episode 6, the episode that broke all our hearts. Let's get into it. The arena for this episode is modeled after small alleys behind houses that you could easily find in Korea in the 70s and 80s. Here our characters will be playing with marbles. And although playing games with marbles is not unique to children in Korea, the word gambu is. I looked up an explanation of the word gambu on a Korean blog, so here is my freehand translation. Gambu is your comrade, best friend, or teammate in games such as marbles, 딱지치기, the game we saw in episode 1, and so on. You become gambu by pinky promising that you will share everything with the other without distinguishing between mine and yours. Another very sweet concept that has been kinda ruined by this show. Also, this is another old-fashioned concept, so not many young people nowadays know about this word. For this episode, we could also talk about the lack of support systems for juvenile youth in South Korea, but let's just save that for another day. Instead, in case you were curious, the movie that Ji-young is referencing is the 2015 movie Inside Man. Interestingly enough, Inside Man is a movie about the corruption within Korean society. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? Again, I found nothing to add to episode 7, so let's keep going with episode 8. In this episode, we have a scene where everyone's favorite police officer Junho escapes the game island. He reaches another smaller island and finally has some phone reception. Here, it was interesting to see that he got a signal from SK Telecom. This did not only tell us that 1, they were definitely still in South Korea, and 2, that they were relatively close to the mainland with network coverage still available, but also that SKT probably paid a nice sum of money to be featured in this show rather than KT or LGU+, the other 2 big telecommunications companies here in South Korea. And last but certainly not least, episode 9. I think by episode 9, we all know that this show will not have a happy ending no matter what. So we know that the episode's title, One Lucky Day, is meant sarcastically at best. However, only Korean viewers will have understood the true double meaning of this episode's title right away. One Lucky Day, or 운수 좋은 날 in Korean, is a story of a 1924 novel by author Hyun Jin-gon. Many Koreans study this story in high school, so it is widely known. The story is of a man surnamed Kim, who is a poor rickshaw driver with a sick wife. One rainy morning, his wife begs him not to go out and leave her alone because she is feeling too ill. However, since he wasn't able to earn any money for several days, he decides to go out to work anyway. Unexpectedly, he meets several well-paying customers and claims that this is a lucky day. After working well into the night and even having some drinks with his friend, he finally returns home only to see that his wife has already died, leaving their crying baby next to her. Seeing as the story One Lucky Day actually describes the worst type of day, we can only anxiously anticipate what our protagonist Gi-hun will find once he returns home to his sick mother. What a dark end to this video, but that's just the kind of show that Squid Game is. Like many of you, I just love the show for its writing and characters, but the social commentary on Korea and the little bits of Korean culture just added another layer of complexity for me. I really hope you liked this deep dive into the Korean culture inside Squid Game. If you did, please let me know via a thumbs up, and I will see you next time. Bye bye!